and getting it out. Got one. Look at that, right off the bat. Oh, they love this pattern.
Hi, Peter Charles here of Hooked Fly Fishing. And today we're going to tie a woolly bugger, but it's going to be intended for deep water use. So we're going to add some weight to it, and we're also going to pay attention to the colors as well. Now, I found this to be a very interesting book. It's called What Fish See, and it talks about the colors of our flies and lures when they get deeper in the water. And so you get into colors like red and orange. As you get deeper, they become less useful and, in fact, get deep enough and red turns to gray. Yellow retains its colors, black, purple, and surprisingly, there are some other colors that's surprising depending on water conditions, whether the water is clear, blue, green, muddy. You'll get different results depending on different colors. So this was intended as a deep water woolly bugger, so I went with black and grizzly. So I could use this, which is the gray and the black, which gives me the contrast. You could go with a yellow grizzly, a chartreuse grizzly would work. So there are a number of choices we can use, but in this one I'm going with natural grizzly and black as my color scheme, as something that's quite visible. And I've caught bass and sheephead on this. Now I know the title says carp and bass. I don't see why a carp wouldn't hit this as well in deeper water, but this is primarily a sheephead bass fly, and it works for both. And I've fished a fly like this down over 20 feet deep on the end of a full sinking line. So that's kind of like my target for it. In river situations, I'd be fishing it in the deeper, faster runs to get down under the fast water, using it with either an intermediate or maybe a type 3 full sinker and just get it right in there and slow it down and work those deeper slots. So let's get started. I'm using a Mustad streamer hook here. It's a 3 extra long and a size 2. My tail is black marabou. My hackle is natural grizzly in a saddle hackle. My thread is a black 6/0. And the body is black chenille. Now I've got a cone on the hook, and I'm also going to be using some lead as well. So we're going to put some lead on here first. So take off about a couple of inches and wind on and try to keep the wraps close together. Okay, you can see I've got my lead tightly wrapped together. Now what we're going to do is we're going to put a little CA glue right at the back of the cone along the hook shank. And we're going to shove that lead right in there like that. Now, one of the things I want to make sure is that the cone doesn't wobble from side to side. So in other words, I don't want my cone off to one side or another. It doesn't matter if it's tilted down a little bit because the down eye hook will cause that, but I don't want any side to side motion. Now we put on our thread. Let's get started. Now we put in our marabou, just a couple of wraps, and you want your tail roughly the length of the hook shank in there. That's about right. Now I'm just going to work that back. And you take it all the way back to the start of the gape. Okay, we trim that off. Now for our hackle, you can see I've created a tying in point. I've just cut that off. Okay. Now it's time for our chenille. And you can see I have pulled off some of the fluff and exposed the core to give me a tying in point. Now I'll wind all forward. Bring it up onto the lead. You can put a few wraps in here on the lead. Okay, now we'll put on a half hitch. we'll wind on our chenille. Make sure your marabou stays out of the way. Put one right at the back. Put those tight together, make them stack up so you get a nice thick solid body. And I'll back that up. Half inch. Now for a hackle, get all that marabou out of the way. Put a wrap right at the back and come forward. Now we've got a few fibers trapped in there. Pick them out. Now I like to stack in the front like that to make the front end quite bushy, and that creates the turbulence that's going to kick around the rest of this fly. Okay, I've stripped off a lot of the material on that quill, so I'm tying in the bare quill. Stroke that back. Now, here's a little trick. This fly can get rather fragile as far as this tying in point. So you take a little bit of CA glue and spread it up and down the thread, and then you wind that on. And that will help to lock in the quill so you don't have that quill pulling out later on. And then we just whip finish. Okay, there's our deep water woolly bugger. Keep in mind the essential ingredients here. We have a cone head that's going to push some water. I use a big cone. It's about a 1/4 inch cone. I pack some lead behind it because I want the weight on the front end of this fly. I don't want the weight at the back end. So I've shoved that lead forward. I've used a little CA glue to hold that all together. I've used contrasting colors here with the grizzly and the black. So when this fly gets deep, it's easily seen. Those contrasting colors work together to make it more visible. And I've really piled on the wraps at the front to create a bushy front. So when you're retrieving that, that'll pulse on the strip and also create turbulence, which will kick all this material around. So it's a very basic pattern, but there's a little bit of thought that goes into it. And remember, if you pick up this book about what fish sees, you get an idea of what colors you can use if you're going to fish deep in green water, clear water, muddy water, and what colors work best and what color combinations are likely to work best and make the fly the most visible to the fish. And this particular fly has taken both sheephead and smallmouth bass in lakes. I don't see why it can't be used for other species in other types of water, but wherever you need to get down. It is a bit of a nasty thing to cast, so when you're casting a fly like this, really slow down, open up your loops. Don't try to power it. It's the worst thing you can do. Just be very smooth as you come forward, and it'll go quite nicely. I also, by the way, use this with fairly long leaders. Because this fly gets down on its own, I can use it with an 8-foot leader on the end of a full sinking line. That extra separation gives me a little bit less chance of the sinking line putting a fish off. So, give it a try. It works. I've got some lovely sheephead with this fly and smallmouth bass. So, the deep water woolly bugger. Cheers.
Got him. Get me out here. Oh! I bet you broke